Thank you very much, Paul. So yes, welcome everybody to this last but certainly not least session of the Heat Pump Forum 2024, and it is about communication. So as the heat pump sector, who do we want to speak to, what do we want to say, and how best to get those messages across? Those are big questions, so I'm very pleased to have three expert panelists to come and discuss them up here with me, and I'd like to welcome them now up here to the stage. Thank you very much. So I'll just briefly introduce you. So firstly, Dan Peters. Dan is Managing Director of Common Futures, an energy transition consultancy based in the Netherlands. He advises energy companies, governments, and associations on energy system integration. Before founding Common Futures, Dan worked at the consultancy Guidehouse, the Dutch Environment Ministry, and as an MEP assistant in the European Parliament. Philippa Nuttall. Philippa is editor of Sustainable Views, published by the Financial Times Group. She was previously editor-in-chief of Foresight Climate and Energy, founder and editor-in-chief of Energy Monitor, and environment editor of The New Statesman. Katja Weinhold. Katja is press spokesperson for the German Heat Pump Association, where she heads the communications department. She's a PR expert and linguistics graduate. She also looks after the association's specialist tradespeople and all topics relating to further training and qualifications. So thank you very much to the panelists. Now, before we get started talking about some of those questions I mentioned earlier, one of the first rules of good communications is to engage your audience. And it's been 2 intense days, so I would also understand if maybe your minds were starting to drift. So we want a little bit of interaction now. So I will ask the AV team to put up the Slido QR code, please, on the screen, and which you should all be able to scan on your phones or go to slido.com and put in the numbers that are there. And we will get started with the first question. I'll just give you a couple of seconds to do that. And there's no right or wrong answer to this question. It's really just to know what these days is your main source of news. Okay, I can see some answers coming in. I think there are also some down below the bottom of the screen there, Facebook, and so on. Okay, I'll give another couple of seconds for those who aren't sure. Okay, so number 1, online newspapers, closely followed by LinkedIn. It seems that seems fairly definite, and some other sources a bit lower down. So now I want to bring in Philippa as a journalist, looking at these answers and thinking more generally about the media. Maybe you'd like to just give a little bit of context about what the media is, what are we referring to when we talk about it, and about these particular answers. Are they representative or are they surprising?
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, so I think in terms of the media, for a quick run through, there are basically 3 types of media. There's the general media, The Guardian, Le Monde, El País, etc., that everybody could read. And there are business publications like Sustainable Views that I'm editor of, which is aimed at a business community, so it often goes into a bit more detail than you might find in a general newspaper. And then there's also the trade press, which is generally very specific for each industry. So I imagine for the heat pump world, there is something that sort of deals with heat pumps per se. But then we also have different types of media in the sense there's the written media, radio, TV, and social media. Now, these results suggest, without trying to sound rude, because I'm also of the same generation, that the audience today is of a certain age, because according to the Digital News Report 2024 from the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism, this is not how most people consume their news. So if you want me to give you a bit of a flavour, so most people, only 20% of respondents to this study, which I think covers about 50,000 people in 47 countries, actually get their news from online newspapers or actual news apps. And that's down 10 percentage points since 2018. So there is a real decrease in the number of people who are actually going to the source material. Instead, most people get their news from YouTube, WhatsApp and TikTok, and I don't think any of them were mentioned the slide we've just seen. So I think that's something that to think about. And I think what's also interesting there perhaps as well, that people are not consuming written news, but especially younger people, they're consuming videos. So they're going to different sources and they're also consuming it in a very different way than they have done in the past. I think also an interesting thing just to pull out perhaps from the Reuters survey is the fact that there's a big concern about fake news across the generations. So even if people are consuming their news on TikTok or wherever, they're also concerned about whether it's real or whether it's fake. Perhaps I'll hand back after that.
Okay, thank you very much. That's quite revealing. I don't know if you've still got the Slido open, but we are going to have another question now, which is a little bit more kind of maybe subjective. And the question is, I think we can maybe get it back on the screen. What is the most common reaction of people when you say heat pumps? It's a word cloud, so feel free to type in the kind of most common reaction that you face. Expensive. Yeah. Okay. Can't read that. So a very interesting selection of words coming up. I think there's a couple of themes coming up there in terms of cost, price, some confusion, whether they work or not, what exactly they are. Clearly, there's still some work to do for us communicators. Okay, so carry on still typing in there if you wish to, but now I want to turn to you, Dan, and ask in terms of the clients that you advise, how do they want to communicate in terms of the transition and sustainability, and has that changed over time?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. By the way, on the last question, I almost don't dare to say I've got 2 printed newspapers delivered to my house every day. I think what I see is my clients are interested in simplicity beyond complexity. The energy transition is complex. There's many interconnected challenges. But in the end, decision makers, ultimate decision makers, need simple choices, well argumented, and that's what they are looking for. Also, I think it's often not enough to just state the climate benefits of a product, of an offering. So it needs to be multiple benefits. And I think here, heat pumps is maybe a bit similar to electric vehicles. You know, it's not just about the climate benefits, but it's also about the comfort, the customer journey. So I think that's very relevant for my clients also, that in a piece of analysis or advice, they are not just looking for climate benefits, but also wider societal or consumer benefits.
Okay, thank you. And then Katja, coming specifically to the heat pump sector and communicating from inside the heat pump sector, and when you're pitching your messages to media, are you finding it more difficult these days, or what is it the experience like?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I think during the last couple of years, the situation has changed drastically, since society and therefore also media, particularly public interest media, have become much more interested in our technology. So the challenging part is not so much the pitch of the messages itself, but to get the output right. So on the one hand, I think communication is much easier than, for example, 10, 5 or 3 years ago. All the journalists, publishers and editors we tried to get in touch with for years are now contacting us to improve their heat pump knowledge. So our communication became rather reactive than proactive since 2.5 years. Which is on the other hand difficult because our technology and everything around it is quite complex, as we all know. And the demand, you mentioned it, of nowadays media representatives, whichever channel, is to receive quick and short pieces of information. Explain to me, for example, in one sentence, why the market has collapsed. Or why are heat pumps so much more expensive than gas boilers? One sentence. Or 3 sentences. What are the major challenges of a heat pump installation in a residential building constructed in the 70s? This isn't easy. And this kind of discourse, from my point of view, doesn't really match with our technology at all. So the growing interest in heat pumps has also created a sometimes dangerous half knowledge. And also the good old legends and myths we all know are enjoying a new boom too. But we basically do what we always did. We try to explain. We're explaining like a mantra and with a lot of sensitivity the advantages and features of our technology and continuously dispelling the entrenched myths and legends. The difficult part is, of course, that fear sells. We all know this. We have seen this phenomenon increasing in the past few years. And since our technology became politicized, at least in Germany a lot, in connection with the debate surrounding our Building Energy Act, it has been difficult to counter certain narratives in some areas. Don't get me wrong, there is, of course, an increasing number of very sophisticated, high-level and brilliant reporting and coverage around. But I keep saying that our technology is still like a soft, tender, delicate plant, kind of, and it reacts very sensitively to installation errors as well as to communication attacks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Katja. And then to pick up on what you said, Philippa, Katja mentioned the myths, and we see here on the word cloud there's some confusion about whether heat pumps work and so on. Where do you think these myths are coming from, and is it something the heat pump sector itself is doing wrong, or how can we address it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think part of it is it's a new technology, so it's not, well, for most people it's a new technology, even if it's, has been around for a long time. So people don't know about it, so therefore there are legitimate questions. Heat pumps have, in Germany and other countries, become part of the culture wars. We've seen a drive from vested interests, fossil fuel companies, the right-wing press, right-wing politicians against heat pumps. So there has been a very concerted effort in certain countries to spread myths or things that may not be 100% correct about heat pumps. And I think there is, as we can see from the word clouds, there are genuine questions, and heat pumps are more expensive than gas boilers. So there are some legitimate questions that people have there. And unfortunately, those questions are being answered, perhaps by the wrong people who are playing to those issues. I think another reason, I mean, whether the sector's doing anything wrong, I think it's perhaps in terms of also who's being communicated with. I mean, I know that every time a plumber comes to my house or somebody else who's in the sort of trades, they've all got a bad heat pump story. Whether it's true or not, I don't think we're quite sure. But I think it's also within the industry that everybody is communicating in the same way. So it is to journalists, but it's also general communication that filters down as to what is a heat pump and how it works. And as Katja said, it's a complicated technology, and nobody wants a complicated response. So I think perhaps the industry as a whole needs to have some simple answers that everybody from installers to plumbers to people speaking to the press can explain it in those terms. And I think it's like we used to see a little bit around climate change. You'd suddenly get a scientist speaking on Radio 4 in the morning and you'd lose everybody because the explanation was too complicated to answer the question. And we need, these simplified versions that people can pick up on and become sound bites and start to tell a different story.
Okay, thank you. And then coming back to, it's been briefly mentioned already, but the situation in Germany, Katja, with the law and the politicization of the heat pump, could you maybe briefly just explain what exactly happened and how you went about kind of counterbalancing?
You mean the Heizhammer story,
The Heizhammer,
right?
yes.
All right, yeah. I'm going to go back to it, yes, thank you. I think, well, it started with the massive hype for heat pumps in spring, summer 22, related to the Ukrainian war and the fear of an upcoming gas shortage. The demand for heat pumps was skyrocketing, so was the applications for subsidies and also the media coverage. As I mentioned before, I mean, for us, it was the most exciting time I experienced at BWP. Everybody wanted to know everything about heat pumps. TV formats, the biggest national newspapers, radio broadcasts, all of them. It was just crazy. And, well, and they weren't even satisfied. I mean, media and also society and politicians, they weren't satisfied with the 500,000 heat pumps that were supposed to be installed annually from 2024 onwards according to a heat pump task force, which was established by the ministry, no, media was asking, was crying, will 500,000 be enough? We need more. This was the narrative these days, yeah. So by that time there were temporary supply bottlenecks, partially because of the corona crisis after effects still, and overstretched installation companies. In addition, the winter was pretty mild then. Gas prices remained moderate, also because of the questionable gas price cap we had. And so the heat pump euphoria kind of faded away, and shortly after, the debate concerning our Building Energy Act began. To make a long story short, it was a masterpiece of miscommunication by the federal government and particularly by the Ministry of Economics and Climate Protection. No frame setting, no pre-bunking. So the peak of the narrative of those days was that according to this directive, people were to be compelled to scrap, to get rid of their old gas and oil boilers by 2027 latest and replace them all with heat pumps, which was of course complete nonsense from the beginning. But the news was out, and the minister became victim of a massive concerted media campaign. And together with him, the image of our technology was suffering great damage and became the punching ball for this incredible political debate. This was when Habeck's heat hammer, Heizungshammer, was born, invented by an editor of Germany's most popular daily tabloid newspaper. And this expression then found its way into many discussions and spread all over the place. Yeah. So, well, in fact, I could imagine that the expression Heizhammer might actually be nominated for one of the unwords of 2024. I'm not sure, but could happen. So what was our communicative strategy then? Well, it was a conscious decision not to jump onto this heated debate from the beginning directly. Communicative restraint. We tried to remain calm and pragmatic and continue to provide everybody with objective, neutral information like we always have been doing. Of course, we try to spread positive messages because we do have 1.5 million heat pumps installation in Germany, and most of them, the majority, runs perfectly well and efficient. So we showcase these success stories via all channels. Bottom line, no matter what happens outside, the heat pump is running, and heating without burning anything is simply awesome. We also invested a lot of time, of course, into a strong and patient community management these days over all social media channels. But nonetheless, in addition to that, we were developing together with an agency a social media campaign called Warming Up with Heat Pumps. In this campaign, buildings themselves are talking about their positive experiences with heat pumps in regional dialects. It's quite funny and kind of de-escalating, so if you want to check it out, it's #warmwerden.info. Yeah. And apart from that, what we are doing now, we're carefully trying to depoliticize the technology, especially in the light of the upcoming parliamentary elections.
Thank you. Wow. Yes, what a story. And moving then from Germany to the Netherlands, where I believe recently there was a change or a scrapping of part of the heat pump obligation. If the rules change and there's not this obligation on people, on households to get a heat pump, then how can the sector convince people to get a heat pump? What can we do in terms of communication?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. That is, of course, on the forefront of the minds in the Netherlands, in the Dutch sector. So it was a big disappointment. I think partly, when listening to you, Katja, I think it was similar. It was kind of a bit of a communication disaster as well in the Netherlands. Like, this obligation was launched, I think, slightly before the energy crisis hit. But first saying, hey, you know, you need to get a heat pump. And then only afterwards, when the questions will go, okay, what about the financing? What about people with small wallets? What about a little apartment? So first putting out the targets before thinking about all its implications, that was probably not the right order of things. It was a disappointment to the sector. We had kind of since 2018, we have a base load of all new buildings no longer being connected to gas grid. Is still a steady flow of about 50,000 heat pumps a year, and that will grow because there is a focus on building new homes. So that will stay, that base load. The other almost 100,000 heat pumps, like equally divided all electric and hybrids that we had in addition to that in existing buildings. That's the big challenge now. The sector expected that to double or triple. I think the fundamentals are good because since 2015, the energy tax on electricity has more or less stayed the same. It's now 12 cents per kilowatt hour, while the energy tax on gas has tripled. It's now 70 cents per kilowatt hour. So the fundamentals are still pretty good. The payback period of a heat pump is decreasing. That is especially true for the hybrid setup. And I think in terms of communication, more focus on the actual payback period, more focus on the ability of cost decreases, like we've seen. I just made the comparison with electric vehicles, right? So it's the same. It's a big upfront investment, but ultimately over time there's a payback period. So more the market fundamentals are there. A better communication strategy, focus on the long-term financial benefits as well, could hopefully be the job. But there is a bit of a mixed view. But I think some of the heat pump producers also in the Netherlands, they are not even that bothered about the policy to be scrapped, because they think, well, we now got rid of this negative communication around it. We can now focus on the market fundamentals and build on that.
Okay, thank you. That's very interesting as well. Now, we've touched a little bit, well, quite a lot now on communication to the public and to consumers, and I just want to bring in another target group that we always feel in the heat pump sector is particularly important, and that is installers and heating engineers. And Paul mentioned yesterday that the case that can often happen when we call someone to come and fix our boiler or whatever, and we're interested in a heat pump, and we might well get the answer, oh no, I wouldn't do that, or a kind of a negative feedback on it. So Katja, at BWP in Germany, is this a target group that you are communicating towards, and what are you doing, or how are you reaching out to them?
Yeah, Sarah, thank you, definitely. I think in Germany, like in some, but unlike other European countries, it is we're mainly talking about water-led heating systems that are installed by experts who have previously worked with oil and gas installations. So the core message in the direction to the installers and technicians is, on the one hand, that heat pumps are more demanding to install and need to be planned more carefully than conventional heating systems. On the other hand, they are no witchcraft. They will be the future of residential heating and of heating in general, and they can be a lot of fun. The trade guilds in Germany, who are in fact actually in charge of looking after the installers, they are rather conservative and traditional organizations. The Guild for Sanitary Heating and Air Conditioning, they are only now, since approximately 3 years, adapting the training curricula to the new renewable world. We try to support them as good as we can, since BWP also has many members from the specialized trade, like installers, electricians, but also planners and consultants. In fact, 750 members out of our 1,000 members we have in total are actually heat pump installing companies of all sizes, and they are getting more every week. So we are a little bit caught between the stools, so to speak, because we don't want to compete too much with the trade associations. But however, as too little is happening here, we need to do this. So we do this. And we try to provide everybody with all the tools they need to plan heat pump systems well. And we do a lot in the area of further training and qualifications in order to reach all target groups, from master craftsmen, journeymen to trainees. And we also support our trade members, of course, in terms of communication by arranging, for example, interviews, by doing press trips to their installations, and activities, of course, at trade fairs, in order to increase their appetite for heat pumps. Of course, a lot is also done by the manufacturers. Apart from that, 3 trades are involved in heat pump installation: plumbers, electricians, and refrigeration technicians. So traditional disturbances among those are historically grown. So communication is also sometimes about mediating between the trades and energy consultants and planners. So our aim is kind of to turn the former deliverers of fire into the heroes of the energy transition. Some, of course, will not jump onto this wagon. But new business models also arise, particularly from a more systemic driven approach. They are gaining ground. So and perhaps also new job profiles will be established soon. So the situation remains challenging, but it's a very important target group, and yeah, we try to make the best out of it, definitely.
Okay, thank you. And now coming back to where we all are today, here in Brussels, we've seen with the recent EU elections, of course national elections as well, and now with the new European Commission, that there has been a shift in terms of the political spectrum, but also in terms of then the language that is being used in the communications, to a more kind of conservative, industry competitiveness focused mindset and narrative. So I wanted to ask Dan, how can we best speak to people who are coming from this slightly more conservative right-wing spectrum?
Well, the good news is that the targets as such are not being debated by the big majority of policymakers, right? So that ultimate overall framework is there and will stay there, and that means that you know, the built environment has till 2050, the power sector and industry have till 2040 to fully decarbonize. It's indeed just a matter of scaling up business. I think the current kind of challenge in which the heat pump sector is not that different from the challenge of the business case in offshore wind, electric vehicles, solar PV. So it's all about indeed industrial competitiveness and keeping cost affordable for consumers. So thinking along and coming up with smart solutions to bridge the financing gap is going to be crucial. I mentioned before a couple of times, kind of focus on payback period, transparency on how the costs were. I think in one of the previous comments sessions, there was a bit of discussion on intertemporal cost allocation for hydrogen and possible power DSO build out. Well, there's also a temporal effect, of course, in paying for heat pumps. So putting that perspective of costs, it was the biggest word in the word cloud, over a period of time, I think that's going to be crucial. I think also there is a potential for the hybrid heat pump, especially in all the buildings, as an affordable option. So more targeted advice to people. About the house. So what is the best way for you to decarbonize? That's going to be crucial. But the fundamentals are right, and they are not going to change.
Okay, thank you. And then, Philippa, do you think that's also true when addressing the wider public? Is it that cost issue? What is it exactly that we need to do to cut through?
Yeah, I think it is the cost issue, and actually explaining what these bigger concepts mean. I mean, what does competitiveness or growth actually mean to the general public and the individual? So I think Katja picked up on some good things in terms of, you know, fact-based, talking about a local level as well. These are local issues often. Data, neutral communications, and really bringing it down to the local level so that people can see what it actually means for them. And I think the cost issue is a big one. And I think also to see that the communications, perhaps from industry as well, is pushing that the cost. Governments need to come up with solutions for the cost. It's not for the individual person to always have to sort of fork out for what needs to happen in terms of the transition, and the onus isn't on them. I mean, I think what Brussels has done in terms of electric vehicles is interesting in terms of they've changed the tax relief in terms of vehicles. So before we had these big diesel vehicles, there's been a massive shift now to EVs, and that's been done very much on a business basis rather than the individual themselves having to fork out any of the cost. And I would imagine that if a similar story can be told around heat pumps, then that makes them people much more interested in them rather than them thinking they have to bear the cost themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I want to now just pick up on a few things that we mentioned a little bit earlier in the session. So one thing is, coming back to the beginning, and Philippa, where you said people get their news from, and it's actually mostly these days WhatsApp and TikTok and so on, and here in the room, these are not necessarily the places we're all getting our news, but does it mean that we as a sector are completely out of touch? I mean, this is for anyone to come in on. Should we be actually investing in TikTok?
I mean, I think if you want to communicate with the younger generation, then Instagram, TikTok or YouTube is where they're getting their news from. And also, I mean, anybody who's got, you know, teenage children or lives with young people, they're sharing stuff constantly. It's like this constant sharing of videos. And so that's what they need, is something that's very immediate. So if the video that's being shared is a negative one about heat pumps or exploding EVs or anything else, that's what's going to resonate with them. Whereas if they then get something, or there's another video that actually explains the facts, then that may also be shared, and it needs to be perhaps done in a way that draws people attention to it rather than it just seen as a boring, complicated subject. So yes, I think things need to change in the way that we communicate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And Dan, have you seen a shift with your own clients in terms of the platforms that they're using or the way they're communicating?
Well, I think there's a big difference between general public and the business community, right? So I haven't seen a big shift like, you know, the LinkedIn websites, Google ads, like, but of course, and that has also not changed based on transparent assumptions, transparent data. I just wanted to add some historical kind of learning from how the gas infrastructure was built in the Netherlands in a 10-year period. It was literally thousands of people being involved, ringing people's doorbells, explaining them that this was not about a transition just from coal to gas in terms of the infrastructure, but they needed a new stove, they needed new equipment as well, with brochures, and it was not the company that sold the equipment, but it was the public, the municipality being involved. And I think if we kind of look at that and see what the lessons could be for today, it's the DSOs that will dig up virtually every street in this continent. They are planning, you know, building. That could be combined in kind of, you know, production routes with an information route. Like, carefully think about how you're going to communicate with people, and involving trusted parties like the municipalities.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. Third parties. Yeah. Thank you. And then, Katja, you mentioned before the kind of contrast between the increased media attention and wanting to have very short, punchy answers to questions which sometimes are a little bit complex. I mean, how do we reconcile those two things? What is the best way of trying to explain something that is a little bit complex to a public or to a media that wants something very, very short?
Yeah. I mean, we do actually invest a lot of time in creating, like, for example, little videos, YouTube shorts, or even Q&As to address those questions and to get those very short bits of information and to explain, like, all the to kind of cut the complex topic into little pieces and provide our audience with it via all social media channels. We work a lot on Instagram, LinkedIn, of course, X, even Mastodon, and YouTube, which is very, very important. We were thinking actually about TikTok, but since we still see that like our target group, like homeowners mainly, of course the children of them, they can also spread news and messages. Yeah, but we just don't have the capacity. We might jump onto this train even a little bit later. Yeah, I think, you know, you have to, what we try to do is like on our website, for example, we have like everything, like brochures you can download for like older people and like all the videos and shorts. And so we try to, we try to lead people to our website to provide them with everything they need, neutral information on heat pumps. So I think this is what we have to do. And then via this short messages, which we do, for example, spread via this campaign I was talking about, warmwerden.info, very, very brief messages. But then if you click on it, you get the more complex stuff, for example, on our website. So give them like little bits and pieces and then catch them and then try to get more into details.
Okay, thank you very much. In a minute, I want to see if there are any questions from the audience. But first, one other to all three of you. At the European Heat Pump Association, we're just organizing the first ever Heat Pump Day, which maybe many people here are going to be partnering up with us on the 21st of October. Now, the aim of this is really a communications campaign, an awareness-raising campaign to try and make heat pumps something a bit more familiar, a bit more kind of, to make people more aware of what they do and that they're not so mysterious. What do you think? Is the risk of this campaign that we end up just talking to ourselves, or is it something that you think could be useful? I don't know who wants to come in first.
Well, I think it's very useful because, like, as we talked about this before, if we're going to establish this, like, as a permanent institution every year, same day, a heat pump day, I mean, there's a day for everything. So we have to get into one of those calendars, and then it's going to be like, because heat pumps, they need to be, like, really part of our world and our society. So I think it's a good, like, signal. And, well, we will see what will happen this year. But I think it's a good, it's a good opportunity to kind of, get out of our bubble and try to grab like some more, target groups.
Yeah, I mean, I think communicating with people and normalizing things I mean, obviously people can pick up on it and use it as an excuse to spread negative stories, but ultimately I think they're here to stay, so therefore you need to communicate about them. Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, no. I think that it definitely sounds like a useful timing for this campaign. So it makes sense to me. One thing that I always really liked when I was working at the European Parliament is you had this renewable energy house. I'm sure it's still there with all kind of renewable technologies, and you could go and see it, and that makes it really tangible. So I was just thinking, like, can the association not go to the European Parliament, check out the heating situation there, and just offer them advice on and take MEPs along to make it really tangible? I think that that could be part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, seeing something with your own eyes and experiencing it just is worth 1,000 articles, really. So yeah, absolutely. Good. Thank you very much. I don't know if there are any questions in the audience for anyone. I can see a hand at the back. The microphone is on its way. And another question here.
Thank you very much. Delia Villagrasa from the Cool Heating Coalition. Now, we don't have industry as members in our coalition. We have think tanks and NGOs, but we see heat pumps as one of the key technologies to help decarbonize the sector. So we're very favorable to heat pumps. And therefore, the question basically is, we are following the media all over the European Union, and we see it's not just Germany which has the Heizhammer. Basically, this is coming all over Europe. You have certain political parties which are using heat pumps as kind of one of those proxies to be against green policies or what they perceive as green policies. We do not see the pushback from the industry against that type of narrative. So whatever you're doing, guys, I'm sorry it's not working. And I really want to emphasize that message. We can see this issue becoming more and more politicized. And I would like to emphasize how important it is not just to work on the public per se, that is really important, and I think you now have enough of a client base which loves the heat pumps you have installed at their places to counter with positive stories, but you need to go for the policymakers, not just at member state level, but also here in Europe. And the national associations need to talk, maybe you already do it, but again, I don't really see it working. You need to work on the conservatives to ensure they keep on board with your industry and see it as part of the big solution. And if we don't manage that really quickly in the next 6-7 months here, then the next 5 years, with the same policymakers sticking around for 5 years, are going to be lost. So I would like to see a strategic communication campaign across EU member states and at EU level from your sector. We can't do that, we're a small association. But you are a big industry and I want you to do that. So, are you doing it? Question.
Thank you very much. I think there was a second question, which we can... Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Søren Friis Hansen. Some of you know me, Sarah, working as a consultant, helping also EPA. Yes, actually, it's a little bit a spin-off from the previous question. I will start with an anecdote. I remember I was 7-8 years old when Sweden actually enforced conversion to district energy in the early 70s. They got the kick in the butt from the oil crisis. And I remember my father, he was snarling like a lion when he was forced to get rid of his stinking, greasy oil boiler. And he thought it was a socialistic scam. And I remember it clearly. And I think when I compare to today, there is, of course, a big difference. There's social media, where you get very fast distribution of more or less fake news. Katja, you have mentioned it. But I do actually wonder how big the problem is. So one problem is, of course, these people that still or will need help in the financial part. But then we have also these people that the previous speaker mentioned. And I wonder if we have any idea of how big that problem is. And then I have a second question of a little bit more concrete nature. What can EPA do to distribute help other national associations, other countries from the learnings we gained in Netherlands and in Germany, both on a national level as well as here in Brussels. So I think that is what the previous speaker said here, a very, very important point.
Thank you very much. Were there any other questions? Okay. So I think maybe I should respond to some of these questions, but I don't know if anyone else here wants to come in. So the first on the challenge of, the communications campaign at EU level, and then the second question about, indeed, the learnings, how big the problem is, and then distributing the learnings from the situations that we've described today. So I don't know if anyone, the speakers, wants to come in.
I mean, I'd just like to comment that I totally agree with the points that have been made. And from a journalist point of view, what I find quite frustrating at the moment is that lots of businesses I speak to, and I'm not talking about the heat pump sector, but just business or industry in general, they send me all their reports about sustainability and they tell me that they're super ambitious. But when I call them and say, okay, so this politician has said this, are you going to say something? Oh, no, I don't want to get involved in politics. And I think there's a discourse from the centre-right in the European Parliament in particular, which is saying they're going to hold to the Green Deal, but I think what that means in reality may not be what has been for the last 4 years. But also that decisions are being taken by politicians in the name of business. They stand up and say every time we need to remove this regulation, we need to do this, we need to do that because it's holding back business. But then when I sit in a room with business, business often says, no, but that's actually good because it's pushing us forward, or we need this, or we need that. So I think if business isn't happy with what certain politicians are doing, they need to stand up in general and say, this is not in our name, and keep the Green Deal on track. And as a journalist, it's quite frustrating because people will say things off the record, or they'll send you a press release about it, but very few people really want to get engaged in politics. And so I think if what the decisions that are being made at a political level are not helping the heat pump sector, then high up people in the heat pump sector need to stand out and speak to journalists and make that very clear.
Yeah, but in Germany, I would say we really do this. Okay. I mean, we have like my colleagues from the political unit, and there's a lot of demand, of course, and we always try to answer questions. And nowadays, of course, we try to get involved also more with more conservative parties, of course. And this is what I tried to say before. I mean, what we have to do in Germany, I mean, we have this very, it is a special situation that our technology is so much kind of clinched with our Green Minister of Economics and Climate Protection. So, yeah, we do depoliticize the technology in our communication strategy at the moment. I mean, we do try to just spread this simple message to everybody, no matter of what political color, that this technology is just unbeatable in many terms. And there is so many messages we can spread, even at EU level. We have to do this more, of course. But since this technology and everything which has to do with heat pumps is, it's quite complex to explain, we need to be patient too. But what I think is that even if we have like this narratives and this fake news and everything, but I have the feeling that most people, at least our target group, like homeowners, they seem to know that this technology is going to be the standard heating system within the next few years in the long run. And I think we will. Well, we need a little bit of patience, but we will soon pass through this valley of tears, I would say. Thank you. I'm optimistic, so yeah, but it's challenging.
Thank you. Do you want to add?
Yeah, maybe just briefly. I think in the discussions, the energy security argument is going to be crucial in the new political reality as well. Geopolitically, Europe needs to become more independent. So that's one. Being self-sufficient, like we with Common Futures now advise Utrecht University on decarbonizing their campus, and they go for thermal energy storage with heat pumps, mainly to be self-sufficient, to be not relying on anybody else. So that also goes at European scale. And I think the other point, is try to connect new coalitions. Yes, there will be large-scale electrification, but I also mentioned one of the solutions. For part of the solution can be the hybrid heat pump as well. So analyze that together with others, talk about it. So I think those two, like the energy security and opening up also the hybrid solution, I think that's going to be crucial in being impactful in your communication.
Okay, thank you. We are over time, so I want to stop. I just want to answer for the European Heat Pump Association. Obviously, fully agree in the need for always beefed up communications. We can always do more, and that's a very exciting challenge I think that we have, and working with our members, with national associations, with you, heat pump friends, stakeholders, and so on out there as well. Very much look forward to doing that over the next few months and years, and doing that and making sure we have very strong communications, because we do have a challenge, but it's definitely a challenge that we can meet. So with that, I will stop, and I want to thank very much the panelists, and thank you here. Thanks, everyone.
Well done, everybody.
So thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you all for coming, and thank all the speakers for attending today. I hope everyone found the last 2 days as useful as I have. There were certainly everything from politics to technology, AI, and everything in between. We have a huge opportunity over the next 3 months, 3 years, decade, to realize that and have the heat pump as the center technology of all of our heating systems in Europe. I think it's very clear for anyone who has any clue about energy politics, energy geopolitics, that we must do that in Europe. And anyone I've spoken to who is in any way informed has certainly confirmed that. So I look forward to working with all of you and making sure that we do realize that opportunity, and I certainly think we will. And finally, I'd just like to thank my own team for making everything so wonderful today. You all know who you are, and if I try and say all your names, I will miss someone and mispronounce someone. So you all know who you are, so thank you very much, and thank you to the full team.